All right. Good afternoon and welcome back. So I've actually been away for a little bit because of some pressing family issues, which are ongoing, but we got some time this afternoon, and I was looking forward to getting into season one and getting that started. But there are a few things that kind of need to, I think, like be addressed before we get into season one because of what season one is. Right? So season one, as it was originally rolled out, adhered to the original Guild Wars 2 vision in terms of how they were going to introduce new content and kind of how the world of Tyria and the world of Guild Wars 2, that being the world of Tyria, how that was going to kind of exist, right? To where there wasn't going to be these like DLCs that come along every now and then. What we now know to be the Guild Wars 2 model and what we associate with basically every MMO model, like that was not going to be the Guild Wars 2 thing. Their vision for Guild Wars 2 was that it was going to make its money exclusively off of like microtransactions, um, and like really like ArenaNet's pretty good about having non-predatory microtransactions for the most part. There are a couple things that I think are kind of silly, kind of stupid, maybe not optimal. One of the ones I get hung up on in terms of packaging is like the level 80 boost. Like, just call it what it is. It's obviously there for new players. It's very clearly not there for vets. Like, vets know how easy it is to level a character, and like everything built around that level 80 booster is clearly for new players. So to then act like, oh, new players shouldn't use this thing is positively ridiculous. And at $25, that might actually, I'm not saying it's an inappropriate price for what you get, but you're telling new players, hey, like, play our game, and oh, by the way, you can skip the entire leveling process at $25, which is a lot. So there are a few of those little things, but by and large, ArenaNet's microtransactions and gem store really isn't super bad, right? And their vision was that that was going to carry the studio entirely when it came to Guild Wars 2, from like an economic or monetary standpoint. That was going to generate revenue for the game, and the content would come regularly and would be like small iterations as the world gradually went through changes. Little things would be happening here and there, and thus the concept of a living world would really truly be manifested. I thought it was really, really cool. I thought it was a fantastic idea, and I do very much have good memories about that period of time in Guild Wars 2. Having said that, there were some really like very obvious weaknesses with that plan, which is why it didn't last past season one. It turned out to be kind of unsustainable for the studio. Wasn't necessarily nearly as viable as they thought it was. And the idea of what it could have been versus what it actually was, I think, and this is one of the points I want to address before we start playing, I think has led to a lot of like rose tinted glasses type stuff when it comes to season one. I have great memories of season one, and I think a lot of people do because there were some really extraordinary things that happened, and it set the table for what the future of Guild Wars 2 would be. But there were also a lot of bad things that happened, and the game as it is now is very different than the game as was then, in some pretty key areas, and as a result, um, things that happened then wouldn't happen now. And a lot of that is because, some of that is lessons they learned then. They know not to do those things now. Other things, changes in the Guild Wars 2 systems have rendered it to where those things wouldn't happen. One of the big changes is Mega Server. Mega Server would prevent, well, does prevent, a lot of the issues that were experienced during Season 1 in terms of completing Marionette and so forth. There were a lot of servers that never completed Marionette, and that was because they weren't able to. It's also because while it was a very innovative design and Marionette really paved the way for basically every Guild Wars 2 meta event as it's currently executed. There were some failures in the design, and really, like, one troll could pretty much ruin Marionette. And so they had to learn from that. But people were guesting to a handful of specific servers regularly to get their Marionette kill because their server wasn't capable of doing it. As far as I know, Ferguson's Crossing never completed Marionette. If it did, it didn't complete it more than once or twice. Certainly never completed it when I tried, and I probably tried 25 times. Um, that's just kind of the way the game was at that time. Another interesting thing, when we look back and we remember season 2 fondly, and we look, or season 1 fondly, and we look at what it was versus what it is now and so forth, is at the time, those very little content was released at any one time in season 1. Now, a few of the things were big, like Marionette was big, so we remember that as like a big thing. But it certainly was not released in the way that it was re-released, and some things were very small, like the refugees coming out, which is one of the early things that we're going to see in the season 1 playthrough. That was really a very small thing. It was, by today's standards, would be considered like really non-substantive in terms of a content release. So our warm and fuzzy feelings about season 1 and what it was aren't necessarily indicative of what it actually was at the time. I think the quality of the story in season 1 has probably been really grossly overstated, again, because folks have some positive memories about it, but the truth is, and we'll see this during the playthrough, the story really wasn't all that. Like, it had some issues. It wasn't all that great. It's fun, but isn't amazing. A really important thing as we go forward in our playthrough now in 2023 is to remember that we are not looking at season 1 as it was on release. We are, the only thing I think that is in this is an opinion, what I'm about to state. It's not like something the studios come out and said, or I don't know, there's been like a substantive like study of this, but definitely my opinion is that there's very little about season 1 in terms of gameplay in 2023 that looks like the season 1 that we originally got. And that's because the original season 1 was released in these tiny little bits and pieces as time went on with that living world model I mentioned. In 2022, when season 1 was re-released, it was re-released built in the way that ArenaNet is building content in 2022. Right? Or built, past tense now that it's 2023, but so the content looks drastically different because it looks more like what current ArenaNet productions look like. Add to that the fact that season 1, massive amounts of season 1 took place in the open world, which again had a lot to do with their model at that time. And that's a model that they went away from because they did not want people missing out on content, and if you change the open world and people weren't in that open world. So now, of course, the model is that, everything is instanced, right? So you can go back and you can experience it again at any time. Well, that's awesome, but what that means is a massive amount of stuff for season 1 that was open world has been instanced. So when people said, oh, well, season 1 wasn't really new content, they were just bringing old stuff back, I think that was really unfair to the studio because they had to create a massive number, or at least a decent number of instances that never existed because that was open world content when season 1 was originally released. That also means that when they reintroduced it, I really firmly believe that they balanced it for what the game was in 2022 post End of Dragons, which means that it is, just in terms of like raw DPS for the encounters and in terms of the mechanics of the encounters, much more challenging than season 1 was when it initially came out, because current elite specs are capable of DPS numbers that there were there was no way of achieving when season one initially came out. So when we do our playthrough, it would be like really erroneous to look and say, "Oh, this is it's nice to see what we had all those years come back, coming back." That's not what's happening. Not even a little bit. Uh, the re-release of season one served to fill a story gap and served to fill a gap for people who were seeking achievements that were for a very very long time like unachievable. They were locked away because the content couldn't be replayed. So it filled those gaps and it filled them quite nicely. I think they did a good job re-releasing season one. I think they did a very good job in some cases of taking content that was open world initially and making it instanced. I think many of those instances work pretty well. Marionette's a great example of that. Some of the other encounters, uh, I think, work pretty well also. Um, and you get ultimately, you like I said, you get that missing story filled in very effectively. So that's a real positive thing. But it is not the same. It's not the same content almost at all. I would have pretty serious reservations saying, "Oh yeah, this is the same stuff." It's not the same stuff. It does, with that though, in terms of the story, it is going to allow us a seamless transition. So here in a minute, when we start picking up with season one content, um, it will be picking up shortly after, and I think the time might be a little bit ambiguous, but let's say within months of our victory over Zytam. Um, Also, in relation to story, another important thing to note about season one, and this really speaks to the importance of season one and why it's positive that it's back. And another one of the things that it gives to us in terms of the story all the way up to Guyala Delves, what lies beneath 2023 spring, is a vast number, or well, the number's not vast, a significant percentage of the characters that are important to us in our story today are introduced in season one. And I think it gives better context when we see how they were introduced. It helps us appreciate or not appreciate maybe where they are now. Now, even with the reintroduction of season one, some of that is a little bit um, disappointing. Some of these characters that we feel like by now maybe have like these grand stories behind them, we kind of discover don't. And it also it reminds us of something that I think was kind of conveniently forgotten, and I thought was a super weird story choice for ArenaNet. I've always kind of had a problem with it. Is like the sheer number of our compatriots that are like appear to be minors in some capacity. That is a super weird thing, and season one's going to put that on display. Just how young much of our group is. Um, that's weird for a few reasons. One, the average Guild Wars 2 player is not necessarily all that young. Um, so I don't know that there's intended to be like some kind of connection there. But beyond that, it makes like a lot of the decisions that the commander makes and a lot of the things that happen in the story like really bizarre and questionable. So we'll get a chance to see all that. But I do, for better or for worse, like that we have season one again, so that we can look back and we can say, hey, where did Marjorie and Casimir and Timey and Bram and Rox, come from, and what are their backgrounds in relation to Logan or Kaith or Air, Zoja, or whatever the case might be, Ritlock. Um, so a lot of that is going to kind of get developed, and we should be happy about that, right? Okay, so I think that's kind of all the caveats that I wanted to throw out there. Season one is such an interesting, weird thing in terms of how long it was gone, and then it got reintroduced. And like I said, what was reintroduced was it had the spirit of season one, but gameplay-wise is really a drastically different thing. All the same places, all the same characters, same colors, and pretty pictures, but very different to actually play through. So it'll be a fun experience. Having said that, let's get started here. So we're going to begin our season one playthrough. We're going to begin it. You see, we've already queued it up here. Season one, Flame and Frost. New friends, new enemies. Meet with Ritlock of Black Citadel. Okay, and we got a letter which I have miraculously been able to avoid accidentally opening all this time. I believe it's season one related. Yes. So, the Vigil reaching out to anyone who will listen. Remember, this character is Vigil. So I think probably this would come from Priory or Order of Whispers. Were we Priory or Order of Whispers? But because we're Vigil, we get it from Almora here. The refugees are pouring in, and there appears to be an alliance between Flame Legion and Dredge. So there's some weird stuff here. Need to check in with Tribune, Ritlock, Brimstone, and of course that's what we have up here, right? Go and link up with Ritlock. So we know Ritlock already. We fought Zaitan with him, and you would know him very well if your character was Char, because he would kind of be your mentor the way Logan was our mentor, right? Now, because we're human, we only know Ritlock from Logan's, conflict with him, and then that resolution, and then them ultimately kind of, creating some sort of warm, fuzzy situation and defeating Zaitan. So, let's go see what Ritlock's got for us. And it's almost in a way it's hard to go back and play this content and remember that within this vast world of Tyria, we really only had like 5 characters. I mean, there were a whole bunch more, obviously, and we saw them like at the cleansing of Ore. They were all cheering and stuff like that. But 5 main characters besides the commander, and that was Logan, Air, Zoja, Ritlock, Kaith, and then I suppose Traherne, right? Beyond that, we don't have like a big social circle. Hopefully that need is being filled by your guild or whatever, right? Let's see, I think I gotta go up again. From launch to this day, have trouble navigating Black Citadel. I suppose if I main Char, it'd be much easier for me, but I struggle with it. All right, Ritlock, what do we got going on, man?
Talk about that later. I've got a mission for you. You're aware of the refugee situation.
Yes, Tribune. I heard the Flame Legion have been mobilizing in northern Diessa Plateau.
You heard right. They're mucking with our assets up there. It's singeing. Need you to secure that hatchery we discussed. You think you can handle that?
Yes, Tribune. I'll leave right away.
Good. Take any support you can find. You're likely to need it.
Yes, Tribune.
All right. So we have an unknown Char here, and then we got Ritlock, and they're making reference to the refugees and to the Flame Legion activity up in Diessa Plateau, which of course is to the north of the Black Citadel here. This area would be, just by virtue of the need to like level and play through the story. If you were Char, you'd be very familiar with this area. But you can see like these starter areas for the other races, or like, we never even touched Wayfarer Foothills. Probably didn't touch either of these down here either. Yeah, we didn't touch Metrica or Caledon either, because we're human. Obviously, we spent all our time going through that stuff over here, right? So, Ritlock, what is all this about? All right. We'll get to that. Let's ask if he has news about the situation. Chat up the tribunal for the latest intel. The short version, Flame Legion are up to something. Okay, well, when are the Flame Legion not up to something? But this is weird, right? And so I think even when Season 1 initially rolled out, like the immediate response was like, okay, Flame Legion working with Dredge, and of course all the backstory to that we didn't know then, but this was like a weird thing. It seemed like a weird marriage. But they do in some areas, potentially have the opportunity to kind of rub up against each other. So maybe. All right. So Ridlock wants to have like a private conversation at some point after we're done talking to Smodor. Do we want to talk to Smodor? We cannot. We cannot talk to Smodor. Not even for Pact Commander? Alright. That's okay. Char do Char things, right? That's actually a really good representation of, like, Char, hey, the Char attitude towards the commander and the commander's success would probably look something like, hey, good on ya, pleasantly surprising for a human. Kudos to you, but, at the end of the day, like, we still look out for ours. Okay, so who is this other Char? Who, by the way, I think I've always thought like Rox had a great design. I thought the motif was good. I thought, they did a good job creating. Whereas with like some other Char, like Ritlock, they go for like the very aggressive aspect of the Char. With Rox, we get very much the cat thing, right? And certain portions of her model, such as the back piece here, and I believe even this face, were unavailable when this character came out, and then were made available later. So immediate insight into who Rox is as a character, right? We see that she's a ranger, but her commitment to, to living things, in this case, the hatchery of baby devourers is pretty, pretty significant. That's going to be kind of one of the defining things. She will definitely be different than Redlock. We'll say that. Okay, so we heard them speaking. What can we do? An extra sword. The hatchery is north of Nolan in Diaz Plateau, and we're going to go try and defend that facility from the Flame Legion attack. We're going to help Rox out with this. All right, so let's leave here, go check in with Ritlock. See, that's the side of Ritlock that we like, but it's reflected in his facial features and so forth as well.
Troops, my friends, my home. We're losing everything. People are dying. Who do you think you are, barging into my office like this? My people are hunters. They don't know how to fight an army. True, but that doesn't make me your keeper. You're in the wrong place. Go talk to Newt Whitebear. I'm up to my eyeballs in refugees. I heard. I thought you would help. Air has no son. Get out of my office. Now.
Okay, so we potentially have some interesting things here.
Take care of their own messes.
Indeed. Indeed they do. Again, that, like I mentioned earlier, that would be the Char approach to all this stuff, right? So we have a character here named Bram, claiming apparently to be Air's son. That would be the first that we had ever heard of that within like the framework. Again, we've never heard anything about Air's family before, right? Is that why Ritlock was very quick to say Air has no son? Is that because he genuinely believes Air has no son, or is that that he has reason to somehow like discount Bram in that role? So why do you reject that Norn's request? First, we got our hands full. The second, he lied to me. Well, what did he lie about? He said he's Air's son. Okay, so here we have the answer to that question, right? She never said she had any kids, and she would have mentioned it if she did. So is there, it's almost like there's a disconnect here, right? Because Ritlock so firmly believes in the nature of his relationship with Air that he immediately discounted it as a lie, and that was in part why he sent Bram here off. Is it in fact a lie? All right. So rough situation. Rough situation for the Char. What can we do to help? All right. So he's telling us go help Rox. So he mentions here Rox is a Gladia, right? So she was. This is kind of the Char equivalent of like a Ronin. She has no warband, so she is on her own. She does not have a in a culture where being part of a military organization defines your place in the culture. She does not have a military organization, so she's a military outcast of sorts, right? Like I said, kind of like a Ronin. Um, so he's asking her to go assist her. All right, yeah, we'll find Nolan. Like, don't worry about that. Oh yeah, we already talked about that. I don't want to revisit that. Okay. So Bram, heir's son, huh? All right. So he's asking for help in another location, Cragstead. Now it is odd here why he didn't start with Newt Whitebear. Although if we were to like go down the rabbit hole on the cultures, it may be, or you could make the argument that because the Norn are so fiercely independent, not like the Char are. The Char are independent as a race. They're a close-knit race who do not want to rely on or get help or whatever from other races. The Norn are individually independent. So each Norn should take care of themselves and then can potentially collaborate to take care of a homestead or something like that. But the idea that like that might be a problematic for a young Norn to go and say we cannot defend our homestead, right? So maybe that's why he first came to talk to Ritlock. And of course, as he mentioned, as heir's son, he thought he would get help from Ritlock. Oh, and we have the question: why didn't you go to Holbrecht first? Ah, so he has personal reasons as well. Doesn't want to be around his mom. Okay, well we have our own ghosts. Okay, so this is by 2023. This is like just an absolute like it's a trope in the game. Like the torture commander. It's really kind of memey at this point. Like meme-ish. Like it's a big meme, right? In the game, the commander is like this tormented, tortured person. Like get over it. Like because otherwise, because it's nonsense, right? If the commander's so tortured, they would stop doing what they were doing. Clearly, they are not all that tortured because they just keep doing it. So it's actually really bad for the narrative of your game to continue to play that little violin that the commander is tormented. It is, and the current living world, or whatever they're calling it in spring 2023, appears to be completely dependent on this. All right? For our story playthrough, that's much, much later down the road. And by the time I get to that point in the story playthrough, it'll be like 2025, and presumably they will have either gone bankrupt or worked through their bad story writing. But here, so I can't help but wonder when they redid this in 2022. Like, was this in season one, shortly after launch, or was this a 2022 thing? I don't remember. Honestly, don't. All right. All right. So now we got the same achievement for Bram that we got for Rox. So really, we have like 2 missions that we need to execute. We also got some mail. Ritlock, basically just telling us how to get to Rox. Okay, well, let's go. Let's not waste any time. Let's go help Rox. All right, let's just run over there because I don't. It's probably not worth spending the. Well, no, we wouldn't spend anything. We're in a city. What am I thinking? So when I played the very first beta, this was one of the first things I actually saw. Coming from Guild Wars 1 and then getting the opportunity to and then this is your first look at Guild Wars 2. Keeping in mind that the Char were villains and were not like a race that you could play in Guild Wars 1. You could have one Char hero, or maybe there were a couple. But Pyre is the only one that I specifically remember right now. but they certainly were not a playable race, and they were throughout much of the game like the villains, like the big baddies. Um, to see this was like super cool and interesting, and an opportunity to see something different. Um, now it's kind of normal, right? Because there's so much in the game. The game's been around for so long, but at launch that was pretty cool stuff.
Another personal victory.
Alrighty. And so these little things, when I was talking about how the original season one often had like pretty shallow content, so they kept a lot of that stuff in when they reintroduced it. But whereas now, like repairing these signs is like a very small, like insignificant thing. Like we kind of don't care all that much. This is like the kind of stuff to be rolled out, and players would be really excited because what does it mean? What is this all about? Like so we remember it very fondly because it generated so much excitement at the time. But you know, if we are honest with ourselves when we look back, we would be able to acknowledge, yeah, you know, that as exciting as it was at that time, it was exciting because that was um, it was the very first new thing we saw after the court game. Not because it's like an inherently excellent bit of content that was brought to us. Rocks, we showed up.
Close. I scouted around while waiting for you, and it doesn't look good. I'm seeing signs of dredge. We go fast and silent until Sneaky doesn't cut it anymore. Then we go fast and mean. Wait, something's not right. Be on your guard.
Well, at least we didn't have to kick the door open.
Let's go!
So this could potentially be an example of like content that was um, not necessarily rebalanced, but when it was reintroduced, um,
That should do it.
the health pools and the power coefficients or whatever of the attacks for these foes, like all that stuff may be different than it was when season one first came out. Now, this particular instance, or a version of this instance at least, was available before they reintroduced season one, because they reintroduced some season one content during when was it? Was it Icebrood Saga? I think it was Icebrood Saga. During that time, in fact, you know what? It'll actually appear in the story journal. Yeah, right here, they gave us some of the old instances from season one. And so they relatively always, acknowledged that the living world concept didn't manifest the way they wanted it to manifest.
Time to do some
I still think there is a place
We heal as one.
in the MMO universe. Like I think a studio that was truly committed to it could succeed at it. I genuinely believe that. I don't think ArenaNet was the right studio for it, because I think the studio that needs to try is the studio that has other projects that can support them, um, and maybe compensate for the fact that that project may not necessarily be 100% profitable. I think it would be close to profitable. I do. But I don't. But I think the problem would be that you wouldn't have. You would have a small, dedicated player base instead of a large, kind of like varied player base. Like like it wouldn't be a World of Warcraft type thing. It would be it'd be much more niche. Dark Age of Camelot kind of situation, where you were dependent on a small but very committed player base for your existence. And so I think the best case scenario then, unless you really establish that niche and they are really committed, is to be a smaller project for a studio that has larger projects carrying it to profitability. It's weird the pull didn't work on him. I don't see anything about him having stability or anything. Interesting. Didn't work on him either.
Sounds like trouble.
Time to do some real damage.
So if I remember correctly, this, as a playable piece of content, came out after, and I don't remember how long. It might have only been like a week after or something. But it did come out after, like, the signs and the refugees started to appear. So even that little bit, like, kind of had a build-up to it. Where it wasn't... And today, right? Like, that'd be unacceptable. Just give us signs and, like, refugees to talk to. And then expect us to wait on, like, this one instance. Which, while not a bad instance, isn't, like, particularly long either. We're almost done. It'd go a lot faster if I was on a Reaper, but unfortunately I'm not nearly as good on a Soul Beast as I am on a Reaper. Not that it's rocket surgery, I'm just not very good at it. Hey, you want to get up, Scythio? Like, you want to be part of the solution here? Apparently not. Oh my gosh.
We heal as one.
I hear death
So I do definitely wish that we were able to hold the. I could go with like a wave or two less of these guys. I mean, it's fine. Like it because it would be a very it'd be a very shallow instance if they didn't like include some um, you know, like necessary combat, right? Having said that, the same thing over and over isn't always rewarding.
We had the warning. They came out of the ground before we could sound the alarm. Dredge and Flame Legion.
Your warband?
Was stationed here, yeah. Some are dead, but the others barricaded themselves behind the south gate. Here's the key. The invaders were in pursuit. We have to...
You're wounded. You stay here and warn away anyone else who comes. We'll go.
All right. Upper training ground. See if we can find out what's going on here. Look into the welfare of the rest of the warband.
Shoo. Go back to your nest.
Oh yeah, that's actually important.
Listen, I can't take care of you right now. There's the gate. Let me handle this.
So this is a devourer, right? She's a ranger, so she would like have a pet and so forth. Something that was built into core, and I don't think I've ever seen mentioned in any content since,
Get! I don't want another pet.
was the idea that like specifically the Char breed devourers to aid them in like battle and stuff like that. And in the first Guild Wars, that was like very much a thing. There would be like giant oversized devourers that were like really big, kind of like the champ in Outside Ebonhawk. Although that one's branded, but like you know
Smell that? Something's not
the
right.
devourers would very much be a thing, and Char would like breed them and use them. And there are like a couple of hearts or missions or whatever in a couple different maps, excuse me, that are related to that. And I don't know that that's ever really been a thing that that they've really mentioned much more since launch, and maybe they don't need to because it's kind of it hasn't really been relevant to the story in any way anyway. But there are a couple spots where you see that again, whether it's for I'm immediately thinking of one mission or like event and two hearts where that is like a thing. And there may be more that I'm not thinking of right now.
That'll do.
So I don't know that we'll necessarily get to like the open world content, because they did, when they reintroduced all this, they did also reintroduce like some of the open world content, or they at least would like insert a flavor of it. And so there were incursions where these portals were popping up all over Tyria, and Tyrians were experiencing attacks at the hands of these Flame Legion and Dredge together, this Molten Alliance. It's actually on the meta event timer if you like really want to catch one of those. And it is something that is very much like a thing that they rolled out with this, but it's not nearly as prominent when they reintroduced this new content in 2022. Those incursions were not nearly as prominent as they were on the initial season 1 rollout. Far less important. Again, because now so much more of the story is contained within the instance versus within the open world portion of the play. I gotta be careful. I'm gonna get killed here. Alright, well. There goes the portal.
We're too late.
Aww. Poor rocks.
Look, tread marks, footprints. They took some of the workers away, alive. I have to secure the hatchery, but then I'm going to track them down. When I find out where they took the prisoners, I'll contact you.
Alright.
Come on, bud. Let's get you something to eat.
Sounds good. Sounds good, Rocks. All these things are good plans. Feed the Devourer, find the missing people, etc.
Great idea.
I'm
Ready for more.
on board. Alright, so not a lot there. She's gonna back brief Ritlock, find out what happened to the prisoners. Again, like, those things sound like good plans. What about Scythio over here, who was on his ass the entire time we were fighting? Scythio, you got anything more to say? Oh, so much. You have so much to say. Yeah, it's a good thing I showed up, because you're not good for a fight. Looks like everyone's dead or taken. Oh, he's pretty upset about it. Poor Scythio. You know, he might, like, maybe he's old. What does he do here? They maintain the hatchery. Alright, cool. What's the deal with that Devourer? Every batch has an odd one. Alright, well, it's so true. Why did those folks stack? This is the best hatchery, apparently. Okay. So maybe it's like a preemptive thing. Wanted to reduce the Char ability to, you know, like put up a good fight, and defend. Oh, we got mail. We got mail coming out the ass here. Thank you. Rox is thanking us. All right. Well, you're welcome, Rox. What's Ritlock got to say? Okay, so we need to go talk to Newt. We're gonna pass a message from Ritlock to Newt. And we also need to drink an ale while we're there. Alright, I mean, I'll see if I can do both those things. We'll see. Certainly, we can find an ale somewhere in Holbrook. I mean, that is kind of their thing, right? Like, being giant humans and drinking ale, kind of their thing. Not a fan of the Norn. Never been a fan of the Norn. Going all the way back to Guild Wars 1, Eye of the North. Wasn't really a fan of the Norn. It did not feel creative to me. You know, if you wanted to give us like a Viking style, like Scandinavian sort of like feel kind of thing, like, hey, that's great. Like, just give us a region of the world where humans are like that. Like, there was no need to create an entire race. The fact that they can like turn into animals, like the spirits of the wild thing. Again, if you wanted to introduce like the shamanistic stuff and all, like, it's all good, man. I'm on board with all of it. But giant humans are still just humans. Like, you could have done all that with humans. Where's the beer? Hold on. You don't have any of it. May actually say like brewer or something. Merchant. Am I gonna fail at finding? It's actually relevant to other parts of the story, but brings us no closer to ale. So this guy, who appears to have some sort of ale cart, is in fact selling cupcakes. We'll tell Ritlock we ate a cupcake for him. Like, where's the cupcake? There we go. Yeah, there may be ale in here.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't fight. Our
I really want ale. Like I don't want to let Ritlock down. Like I would
Always happy to see customers.
be really disappointed in myself if I did. Oh man. Maybe if I bring him back some meaty worm surprise.
Thing of the anvil is music to my ear.
Wonder if Ritlock's ever been one to partake in meaty worm surprise. Who knows? You never know. You just never know. Alright, well, we failed on the ale.
All I'm asking is that you send a group of Wolfborn to Cragstead. Dredge and Flamechar are burning our homes.
I am well aware. The smart ones are evacuating, coming here, where we can protect them.
The smart ones? You mean the wounded and near-death ones? The fierce are fighting, dying.
I'm sorry, I can't spare anyone. Perhaps there are others who will.
What about you, Air?
Graham, you need to stay here in Holbrook. The people of Cragstead will...
No. You stay, cowering around your bonfires. Soon as I restock my supplies, I'm going to get my people.
I didn't mean...
Who was that kid?
My son.
I see the resemblance. He has your stubbornness.
So, I kinda have, like... Newt's response, even if you say, okay, well, they're dealing with the Sons of Spawnir, and there's all this stuff going on, and, like, you know, there's reason for the... It doesn't feel very Norn. If you're going to make a whole race of giant humans and give them their own culture and their own religion and everything, then, like, at least be true to it. That did not feel very Norn of him. And pretty consistently, Air feels like a very un-Norn Norn. So between these two, like, this doesn't necessarily feel good. He is behaving the much maligned Bram, and he'll earn that you know, people's sentiments later. You know, there's a period of time when he feels kind of non-Norn too. Is acting far more Norn, or what we associate with Norn, the way they were originally written, you know, at the launch of the game, than like either of these. These two are kind of being like him shrugging his shoulders and turning down a fight because they're going to huddle behind the safety of their, like, you know, whatever this is, huddle here in the lodge. And then her being, like, super passive and weird about it, like she doesn't know how to speak to her son. Both, like, really weird things in terms of Nornness. Alright, we're here to offer our services. Alright, so Newt, who cannot spare anybody, is like, has a stranger walk up and say, hey, what can I do to help? And he's like, well, go help that guy so that I don't feel like I just completely failed. In fact, I would consider it a personal favor. We can't spare the bodies right now. I mean, I get, like, if you can literally not spare, like, 3 people, because of, like, if you are stretched that thin, then you have some pretty serious problems anyway. It would put them and Holbrack at risk, scattering the forces. All right, man. Like, you know, election time is not going to go well for you, Newt. I don't know, buddy. All right. So, you know, in part, here's a reference that does help it lend some context. You know, the refugees. And they can spare scouts, apparently. Homesteads and ashes and bodies of the dead everywhere. Jeez. Alright, once again, she's also asking, please go help Bram. So why don't you just send people? Many have gone. Those who remained or needed. Alright. Okay. So apparently the Norn feel that, like, whatever this is, it's going to be a big old crisis, and they're trying to plan for the crisis or whatever. What are your thoughts, Bram? Yeah, he's more concerned about the immediate issue. Alright, well, we'll go along. You don't need an army when you have me, dude. I am here for you. But no ale. I am not here for Ritlock and his ale. Any ale up here? Nope. There is somewhere, like, someone you can buy it from. I know there is. I just don't know where it is because I never play Norn. Never ever. I think across all my accounts, ever, under any circumstances, ever, I think I have leveled 2 Norn to level 80. I think that's it. I'm not a lover of Norn. I made that pretty clear. All right.
You noticed how the sun was spawning the table?
I don't feel like that. Oh, well, they mixed two different things there. Kind of an interesting. Anyway. Did they? Or was that all Zodiac? So I also thought like the Zodiac. I'd have to go back and look. I have it on my main account. The Zodiac stuff is like really interesting. It's kind of anomalous in terms of like Guild Wars 2 theme and aesthetic. So this is where, by the way, I first remember the refugee thing. Not in Diesa Plateau. For whatever reason, my memory of something that happened years and years ago, I remember like refugees along here. I may be misremembering. It may be that they moved them to Diesa when they recreated the content. It may be that they were in both places. No idea. But I very much remember like the signs being along here and like getting the achievement in a snowy area, not an orangey area. But maybe so much time has passed. I might just be dead ass wrong. So Kragstead. Kragstead is actually way up in the north of this map. And it's going to go about the same as the last one went, right? There were small events that would pop up throughout this map as well. And they would involve in fact, some of the assets or the skins or whatever the proper developer term is, I believe are still included on the map. I think if you come up here, so this is Kragstead, which was not a thing that was accessible at launch, and then became an accessible area with Season 1, and you see how there's a thing there with steam pouring out of it? Those would pop up, and then dredge would appear in the same area. I think there's more of them along here. And I genuinely don't remember if those were always there or if they remained after Season 1, but this was a feature, a characteristic of some of the incursions that were taking place during Season 1 was this jet of steam type thing coming up out of the ground. Again, whether or not those particular ones were there before Season 1, I truly do not recall.
I can do this.
You can do it, Bram.
Hey, I smell smoke. We have to go, my friends.
Is this going to be 2 straight doors we don't have to kick open? Amazing. Amazing.
No, not another attack.
No! I can't handle this!
Oh.
We heal as one!
Oh, he moved right out of my thing. That was pretty predictable, in all honesty. Alright, took care of one. We got 2 more groups we need to take care of here. Similar type situation. Why can't I recover my health?
Run! Get to safety!
I did that badly.
Glad that's over.
Replenishing.
Engage pursuit. Come on.
Feel the fury.
There we go. Worked that time. I don't know why it wouldn't work on this dredge. It's kind of interesting.
Feel the fury. Feel the fury.
Still can't get out of combat. I never noticed that before. Oh, there we go. It's weird that it takes so long in this instance.
Time to do some real damage.
To the front.
Three. 3 consecutive doors without us having to kick them in. That was another open world thing, the periscopes. Those are appearing in the open world as well. And still do, I believe, or they, not still so much as they reintroduced them, in Diessa Plateau, I think. I seem to remember that, and this may be inaccurate, but I believe some of the stuff they've rolled out into Diessa Plateau, when they re-released this in 2022, was found in a number of places across, you know, the world of Tyria, during season 1 actually happening, and there was, I think quite a bit of that. So the issue that the studio has now, the idea behind the living world, is that these things would come and go. Well, when the studio said, hey, we can't do the living world thing, and then there were a lot of questions about, because, you know, living world was already happening. So, for example, Kessex Hills was drastically different than, than at launch. And today is drastically different than it was at launch because of season 1 and kind of how season 1 wrapped up. So the studio was kind of in a spot. I don't know, like, forced is a strong word, but they were put in a position where they kind of needed to address that. And so basically what the studio said is each map is locked in a period of time. Some maps are locked in, like, launch date, a certain year, whatever it is, tiering calendar. Um, Other maps are locked, at the end of season one. But this really kind of continues to not be the case. This continues to not work. Because, for example, when we get to season 4, there will be some events involving the armies of Palawa Joko, which have an open world thing. And so every map that those happen on, I guess, are a few years later than launch, right? So this continues to be an ongoing problem for them. But I think these days, anything that is going to leave a lasting signature, so to speak, in the open world, they try to limit just how many maps have that. Because if you look at some maps, they now have, things from, multiple different time periods littered in them, or events taking place that, in theory, are taking places at different times in the story, and it's kind of stupid. The fact that they had one model and went to another model, putting us in a position for that to happen, and I don't necessarily like it, but no one asked my opinion when they were making their decisions, so it is what it is. Kessex Hills will always be in like 3 different times.
What are you doing here?
Now, specifically for Kessex Hills, they did try to address that.
I came back for you. Where are the others?
They were chased up the mountain. I couldn't move fast enough.
I'll go. Will you be?
I'll be okay. You be careful.
So with Kessex Hills, for the season 1 stuff, they actually like altered they did a client-side skybox thing to kind of change how, well, not kind of, it 100% changes how the map looks to you when you're in a certain phase of the story, to give that sense of like different things at different times, to try and bridge that gap in terms of what the date is for that particular map that you were on. It doesn't fix everything, but I think it was kind of a cool idea. Oh, we made it 3 doors before someone had to bust down a door. But at least it wasn't us using our foot. It was Bram using his shoulder. 3 doors. I might keep track of this throughout the duration of the story. How many doors can we make it before someone has to break a door down? Right now, our current record is 3. And I wouldn't be opposed to seeing, future uses of a similar type thing. I think when they rolled out the season 1 Kessex Hill stuff, and it worked pretty well. I think, there was an opportunity there to say, hey, we might have found something that can kind of work for us to create the ambiance that we want when doing certain things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be to address anachronous issues within the the story of the game. It could also be simply to facilitate the story, or even to facilitate like certain events.
There they are. Hurry!
I don't know, maybe you could even do it with like while maintaining participation in a meta event, the skybox appears different. But if you're not participating in that meta event, then it doesn't it doesn't reflect that you're a part of that battle. Obviously, that would make more sense with an aerial battle than a naval battle, but
Enemy contact.
like I think there's some opportunity for that, and we'll see that in a few days when we get to that part of the season 1.
Feel the fury. Lethal combination. I like it. of fury.
Did I just get stunned? Man, what a terrible time to get stunned.
Impressive combination.
Replenishing.
That is a cool fact, in fairness, especially considering that effect goes back to like early game. I like it.
You're kidding, right? Look at you. I'm surprised you can even lift that mace.
This mace will be the last thing you see.
I'm going to enjoy punishing you.
What do I still have here? Do I have longbow? I do not have longbow. I do actually kind of wish I was on longbow. Get up, Bram. Do something useful, please. So I mentioned this, I think, a couple of videos ago. Over the years, ArenaNet has certainly gotten better at
One becomes two.
at making NPCs like in some way useful and not just completely useless. Unfortunately, it appears that in this case, at least, that does not apply to Bram, who does appear like bound and determined to be useless here.
We heal as one.
Replenishing.
Oddly, it looks like at least one of his attacks can be reflected. That's kind of a surprise. I just feel like there are so few enemies of this sort in the game where you can actually reflect their attacks. What is this? Bram. There's a dropped letter. Should we take a look at it? Oh, apparently it's part of a... Oh, we missed a few, it looks like. Well, so...
Bram, they took Ottilia and her family.
What? Where? Why?
They're collecting prisoners. I don't know where they took them or why.
I hate this. We have to help Ottilia and her family. First, I have to make sure these Steaders are okay. I've got this under control.
Just one more confirmation of how great I am.
Oh, shiny.
So I don't know who Attilia is. I guess maybe she's like a love interest for Bram or something. We never really see that manifest. A little bit of spoiler alert there. But it gets me to thinking we really don't see love interests in general manifest in the game, within the story. Aside from the one that's like very intentionally like written in to where it's always a thing. Here in season 1 it will be a thing, and it's going to always be a thing. It's part of what those two characters are. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. And probably if we were to see that with like all of our characters, it'd get really annoying real fast, right? So this achievement here with the drop letter, and then I realized what it was. Like, so Lion's Arch, used to look completely different, and now it looks the way it does. And season 1's gonna give that to us. It's gonna show how that happens. The old Lion's Arch is apparently accessible. I haven't done it yet, but apparently it's accessible through an item you get when you get like all the achievements for all the let's see. Does season 1 appear here, or is it like, yeah, so once you get like all these different achievements here, then you should be able to gain access to that. Even on my main account, I haven't done it. I'm not sure I care that much. Yes, that was close. Except, of note, you are still missing people. So to say that was close, like it was very close, it hit its target. You're actually missing people. Tell me about Bram, man. So, I don't know that we ever get to anything more about this. Mori, the sun chaser. Air's lover? Air's husband? I don't know that we even know. Okay, well, everything worked out. I'm glad you're safe. We're sorry that people were kidnapped. That's not good. Just wish we could have stopped those machines from getting away. So I don't know if this is inappropriate. I mean, he's not, like, is that whining? I don't feel like Bram is whining. But, I mean, let's, like, also, you did your best? Like, well, I was right here. Like, if we're like, hey, dude, you did your best. Sorry you didn't succeed. Well, we also didn't succeed. Like, weird dialogue choices there. Usually they're pretty good about that. That one was not so good. All right, so he's gonna help the rest of these folks get to Holbrack, which is kind of what Newt recommended in the first place. But considering they're under attack, I guess they couldn't just go to Holbrack, right? So now we can get. Okay, so why didn't we evacuate everyone in the first place? Well, they're too proud. Okay, so this does come back to that Norn culture thing I was talking about earlier. All right, so Bram's dad is dead, but again, I don't lived with Yngvi Rugnar. He and his mate taught me well. Oh yeah, who's Attilia? Okay, unrequited love. Unrequited love. Who apparently Bram will get over because I don't think we ever hear about it again. I do think we do rescue her. Do we? I don't know. Maybe we should go find out. All right, we got two more things here. Agent Brandub says, have an urgent request for you in the field. Order of Whispers is searching for the Molten Alliance's base, and they need help. Come help. And Bram says, we are legendary. So this is not like a reference to like legendary weapons or anything. This is, so part of that like Norn independent thing, each independent of themselves, is that each is trying to establish their own legend. So they're all trying to be epic. How does that work? An entire like society of people trying to be epic? Like, what defines epic? An entire like society of like people trying to be epic and like a one-upsmanship and stuff. Like that seems weird. Oh, remember I mentioned that like these things would pop up in the open world? Here they are. So this is not the scheduled one. The scheduled one happens in oh, what's that stupid map outside Lion's Arch? This is just kind of the ones that you get credit for as an event. The ones that are scheduled and it's like a whole thing is Gendarn Fields. Where did the other guy go?